The night had fallen heavy over Los Angeles, a suffocating darkness pierced only by the sterile glow of medical tents erected outside the ruined city hospital. The rain hadn't stopped for days, sheets of cold water beating against canvas and asphalt alike, drowning sirens and soft cries into one endless, pulsing rhythm. Beneath that curtain of storm, Steffi Forrester stood motionless, her breath forming clouds against the cold, her heart pounding with the weight of too many truths learned too late. Somewhere behind her, a woman fought for life. Luna Nozawa, the woman who had once threatened her family, who had betrayed the trust of her husband and shaken the fragile balance of their world, was now the one Steffi had to save. And this time, the price for hesitation would not just be guilt, but death. The news had come like a whispered curse earlier that day. A tip, delivered through back channels of Spencer Communications' security network, said that Luna's incarceration had never been an accident. There had been manipulation in the investigation, evidence fabricated with surgical precision. And now, the same shadow that had orchestrated her downfall had resurfaced, following the news of her emergency transfer to a mobile medical station outside downtown. To finish what was started, the message had warned. Steffi's first instinct had been disbelief. Luna's crimes had been her own, hadn't they? But Finn's silence said otherwise. He had seen the same inconsistencies, the same falsified reports, and it made too much sense to ignore. Someone had engineered Luna's imprisonment, and now, someone wanted her silenced before the truth could surface. Finn's hands hadn't stopped shaking since he received the call from Bill Spencer. Luna had gone into premature labor, bleeding heavily. The roads to the main hospital were impassable due to the flood, forcing them to reroute to the emergency triage site outside the city. The mobile unit was understaffed, undersupplied, and vulnerable. He knew the risk. He knew they were walking straight into danger. But there was no time to think. There was only the woman's pulse fading beneath his palms, the tremor of her breath, the faint heartbeat of the child fighting to live inside her. When they arrived, chaos reigned. The triage center was a blur of noise and urgency, stretchers, flashing monitors, the metallic tang of blood and disinfectant mixing with the smell of wet earth. Luna lay on the operating table, her face pale as ash, her eyes fluttering open only long enough to whisper one broken word. "Please." Finn leaned over her, pressing her shoulder gently. "You're safe now," he said, though he didn't believe it. Steffi stayed close, her stomach in knots. It wasn't compassion that kept her there. It was instinct. Something was wrong. The energy inside the tent was wrong. The way the nurses moved, the way one figure lingered near the equipment without speaking, their face obscured beneath a surgical mask, it all felt off. Steffi's entire body was a live wire, reading every vibration of tension in the air. Then it happened. A flash of metal glinted in the corner of her eye, a scalpel raised, not toward the patient, but toward Finn. "Finn!" she screamed, her voice slicing through the chaos. The attacker lunged. Finn twisted, catching the gloved wrist mid-strike, the blade grazing his shoulder before clattering to the floor. The tent erupted in confusion, nurses screaming, alarms blaring, the sound of equipment crashing to the ground. The masked figure broke free and bolted through the rear flap, vanishing into the storm. Finn staggered back, blood seeping through his scrubs, his mind already racing. "Someone sent them," he gasped. Someone knew she was here. Behind them, Luna convulsed. Her monitor shrieked, a sharp, flat tone that silenced every thought. Steffi's head snapped around, horror flooding her veins. Blood was spreading beneath Luna's body in dark, unstoppable rivers. "She's hemorrhaging," Finn shouted, his hands pressing against the wound as the nurses scrambled. "I need clamps, suction now." But the supplies were gone, sabotaged. Whoever the infiltrator was, they had cut the power to half the station and stolen the emergency kits during the chaos. Steffi's hands shook as she ripped off her jacket, pressing it against Luna's abdomen, trying to slow the bleeding. "She's losing too much," she cried. Finn's eyes locked on hers, desperation meeting determination. "You have to hold pressure. Don't stop no matter what." The baby's heart monitor flickered, beeping erratically. Finn knew he had only minutes. His tools were useless, his environment compromised. Every move was a risk. "I can save the baby," he said, his voice breaking. "But I need to cut, now." Steffi didn't hesitate. She nodded once, pressing harder, praying to a god she had stopped believing in years ago. The seconds stretched into eternity as Finn worked by instinct and candlelight, his hands steady even as the storm shook the tent. Luna screamed once, then went limp. Steffi's world narrowed to the rhythm of her own heartbeat and the soft cry that finally pierced the chaos. A baby's cry. The sound shattered the tension like glass. Finn held the newborn, slick with blood but alive, his chest heaving. "He's breathing," he said, voice trembling. But triumph died quickly. The bleeding hadn't stopped. Luna was slipping away. Steffi grabbed gauze, towels, anything she could find, pressing down with all her strength. "Stay with me, Luna," she shouted, her voice raw. "Don't you dare die here. Not like this." For a moment, there was nothing. Only the rain, the faint pulse beneath her hands, and the terrible stillness of fear. Then, weak but steady, Luna gasped. Finn looked up, his face streaked with tears and rain. "We've got her," he whispered. "She's alive." Outside, the storm was breaking. But the real battle was just beginning. Security forces had arrived, sweeping the perimeter for the assassin. Finn, despite his exhaustion, refused to leave. "She was one of the medical staff," he told them. "Check the personnel logs. Someone was planted here." Steffi's eyes were cold steel. "This wasn't random," she said. "Someone wanted Luna dead before she could talk." When the police finally dragged in the captured intruder, Steffi felt her stomach drop. The face behind the mask wasn't a stranger. It was Daphne. Daphne, the woman who had once worked as an assistant at Spencer Publications, a face so familiar it took a moment for Steffi to process. She looked different now. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, consumed by a darkness that seemed to radiate from within. Bill Spencer himself arrived minutes later, his presence filling the space like thunder. "You," he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. "You tried to kill her?" Daphne laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "Don't act like you didn't see this coming," she spat. "You all made me this way." Her confession came in fragments, twisted by rage and regret. Years ago, before the scandals, before the empire had begun to crumble, Daphne had been Liam's secret. A fleeting affair, hidden beneath the glossy perfection of his public life. When she had become pregnant, he had begged, threatened, and finally coerced her into ending it. It would ruin everything, he'd said. But the loss had ruined her instead. Her obsession had grown like a disease, turning love into hatred, grief into vengeance. And when Luna's scandal with the Spencers erupted, Daphne saw her chance. She infiltrated Luna's case through forged hospital connections, manipulating evidence to ensure her conviction. When Bill's compassion had undone her plan, when he had risked his empire to protect Luna, Daphne's obsession had metastasized into something lethal. "I wanted to destroy everything you love," she said, her voice trembling as they restrained her. "Luna was just the beginning. You took my child. Now you know how it feels." The silence that followed was unbearable. Liam stood pale, unable to speak. Steffi looked at him with something between fury and pity. "Your sins never stay buried," she said quietly. "They just come back wearing new faces." As dawn broke over the wreckage, Luna lay unconscious but alive, the baby in a makeshift crib beside her. Finn sat at her side, exhausted, blood still staining his hands. Steffi stepped into the tent, her expression unreadable. She watched him for a long time, torn between admiration and fear. "You risked everything," she said softly. "For her." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I didn't do it for her," he said. "I did it because no one deserves to die for someone else's lies." Outside, the media had already caught wind of the story, of the failed assassination, the scandal, the tangled web of revenge and redemption. The Spencer name was splashed across every headline, and the city buzzed with questions about how deep the corruption went. Bill stood in the rain, watching as his empire unraveled yet again, but for the first time, he didn't try to stop it. He had seen too much, lost too much. Inside the tent, Luna stirred, her voice hoarse. "Is he alive?" Finn nodded, smiling faintly. "He's perfect." Steffi watched as Luna reached for the baby, her fingers trembling. There was something in that gesture, something painfully human, that stripped away all the resentment, all the history. For the first time, Steffi saw Luna not as a rival, not as a symbol of chaos, but as a woman who had fought her way through hell for the chance to love. When the sun finally pierced the clouds, painting the sky in shades of bruised gold, the triage site began to quiet. The assassin was gone, the truth laid bare, but the scars would linger. In the fragile peace that followed, Finn stood beside Steffi, their hands brushing for the first time in what felt like years. They had faced darkness together, and though trust had been broken, the light that returned between them was real, faint, but real. And in the far corner, Luna held her child close, whispering words only the newborn could hear. She didn't know what the future would bring, whether redemption, punishment, or both, but for now, she had survived. The baby stirred, his eyes fluttering open, reflecting the light of a world that had nearly destroyed him before he took his first breath. In that moment, beneath the rising sun, the war that had begun in vengeance ended in something far greater: mercy. For Steffi, for Finn, for Luna, and even for the broken men and women who had tried to play gods with human hearts, the lesson was the same. Love and ruin often share the same face. And in the end, it is not victory that saves us, but the courage to reach into the blood and chaos and choose to heal. The weeks that followed the storm felt like a blur, a long, aching transition between chaos and something resembling peace. The headlines that once screamed scandal now softened into redemption stories. Daphne caught, revenge plot against Spencer, family exposed. Luna Nozawa cleared of all charges. For the first time in years, the city exhaled. But for those who had lived through the nightmare, peace was not a sudden calm. It was a fragile silence that had to be earned day by day. Daphne's arrest became the closing act of a tragedy she herself had written. The footage from the mobile triage station, captured on the security cameras she hadn't known were still functioning, left no room for defense. Every word of her confession was played in court. Her manipulation of the medical files, the falsified reports, her plan to destroy Bill Spencer by killing the woman and child who carried his blood. The evidence was overwhelming, and when the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts of attempted murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, the courtroom felt like a vacuum. Daphne stood motionless, her eyes vacant, her rage hollowed out. As the officers led her away, she turned once toward Liam, her voice cutting through the silence. "You buried me once. Now you get to watch me rot." Liam couldn't answer. He sat frozen in his seat, guilt pressing down like gravity. The secret of their past, the affair, the lost child, the lies, had been unearthed in public view. Steffi watched him from across the courtroom, not with anger, but with quiet disbelief. Every revelation added another fracture to the legacy their families shared, and yet, in a cruel twist of fate, it was the one woman they had all condemned who had emerged blameless. Luna. By the time Luna was discharged from the hospital, her name had been cleared. The court officially exonerated her after investigators uncovered Daphne's manipulation of her case and the doctored medical evidence that had painted her as unstable and violent. When the verdict was read, Luna broke down completely, not from joy, but from exhaustion. Years of fear and humiliation had built walls around her heart, and now those walls finally crumbled. Finn was there beside her, steady and gentle, guiding her through the storm of reporters outside. Steffi watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. The next morning, the world seemed to slow. Luna sat by the window of her recovery room, the sunlight warming her skin, the faint hum of hospital monitors steady beside her. She could finally hold her son without fear, her fingers tracing the tiny contours of his face. He was healthy, strong, and beautiful, a miracle born from suffering. Finn checked his vitals one last time, smiling softly. "He's perfect," he said. "You did it, Luna. You both made it." Luna's voice trembled. "I wouldn't have if you hadn't been there. Or Steffi." She hesitated before saying Steffi's name, unsure how it would sound in her mouth. The tension between them had been built on betrayal and jealousy, but after that night, the blood, the fear, the shared desperation, they had seen each other differently. Finn glanced at his wife, who stood in the doorway, her arms folded, her eyes softer than Luna remembered. Steffi walked forward slowly. For a long time, she said nothing, only looked at the sleeping infant nestled in Luna's arms. "He's beautiful," she said finally. Her tone was steady, but laced with something deeper, acknowledgement, perhaps even forgiveness. "You should rest. The worst is behind you." Luna nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know you didn't have to help me," she whispered. "I wouldn't be alive if you hadn't." Steffi's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer, then drifted to Finn. "We do what we have to do to save a life," she said quietly, echoing his words from that night. Then, turning to leave, she added, "Maybe we both learn something about what it means to let go." As the days passed, the fragile balance between them began to shift. Luna's story became a symbol of resilience in the media, her redemption arc captivating the public imagination. But for her, fame meant little. She wanted peace. Each night, she rocked her son to sleep, whispering promises into the quiet, vows to never let the darkness of her past touch him. She named him Aiden, meaning little fire, because he had been born in both pain and light, a flame that refused to die out. Bill Spencer, meanwhile, found himself confronting ghosts of his own. The scandal had left scars on his empire, shareholders whispered, and the board demanded answers. But Bill's focus was elsewhere. He visited Luna discreetly, staying long enough to see the child, to hold him once. The baby's tiny hand wrapped around his finger, and something shifted in him, a fragile hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "He looks like Will did when he was born," Bill said softly. Luna smiled faintly, too weak to speak. He placed an envelope on her bedside table before leaving. Inside was a deed to a house by the coast and a note that read, "For you and your son. Build the life they tried to take from you." But even as the city celebrated Luna's freedom, the damage left by Daphne's plot rippled through every corner of their lives. Liam withdrew from the public eye, unable to face the shame of his past being exposed. His relationship with Steffi fractured completely, though this time there was no rage, only resignation. "You can't keep saving people who don't want to be saved," she told him. He didn't argue. Steffi, though, found herself transformed. The ordeal had stripped away layers of pride and fear, leaving her with a kind of clarity she hadn't known she needed. For years, she had defined herself by control of her company, her marriage, her image. But in those blood-soaked minutes of holding Luna's life in her hands, she had understood something raw and essential. Power meant nothing without compassion. Her rivalry with Luna had been built on misunderstanding and ego, but saving her had saved something inside herself, too. Finn felt the shift as well. For the first time since the chaos began, he and Steffi were at peace. They spent long evenings talking quietly, rebuilding the trust that had nearly been shattered. The guilt of what had almost happened to Luna lingered, but so did the gratitude. "Sometimes," Finn said one night as they stood on their balcony overlooking the city, "life gives us second chances in ways we don't expect. We just have to be brave enough to take them." Steffi reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "Then let's make this one count," she said. Meanwhile, Luna rebuilt her life from the ruins. With the help of Bill's connections and Katie's quiet compassion, she returned to her studies, determined to finish her medical degree. She wanted to heal others, the way Finn had healed her. The tabloids still followed her, of course. They called her the woman who survived the Spencers, a title she hated but couldn't escape. Still, she found moments of peace, watching the waves crash outside her new home, feeling her son's heartbeat against her chest, remembering that redemption was not something given, but something earned. Months later, on a quiet morning by the sea, she received an unexpected visitor. Steffi stood at the gate, wind tousling her hair, a hesitant smile on her face. Luna invited her in without hesitation. The two women sat by the water, the air heavy but not hostile. "I wanted to see him," Steffi said. "To see that you're both okay." Luna nodded, bringing Aiden into her arms. The baby giggled, reaching for Steffi's necklace. The tension between them melted instantly. For the first time, they laughed together, softly, awkwardly, like two women realizing how much pain had been wasted between them. As the sun dipped into the horizon, Steffi rose to leave. "Whatever happens next," she said, her voice steady, "I'm glad you lived. And I'm glad he's here." Luna smiled through tears. "So am I." When she was alone again, Luna looked out at the sea, her son asleep in her arms, and felt the weight of everything she had endured, every betrayal, every moment of fear, every second of pain, and for the first time, it didn't crush her. It lifted her. The past had tried to define her, to bury her beneath shame and lies, but she had survived. Not because she was stronger than her enemies, but